webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. My name is Betsy. Thanks for taking the time to join me this morning. We are going to be about an hour and a half, and we're going to give you the tools that will empower you to use Mekko Graphics. This webinar is going to focus on creating compelling charts that highlight insights for management, colleagues, or clients. And this webinar is pretty jam-packed with information. We're going to be spending the majority of our time creating charts and highlighting the major features of the product. At the conclusion of the webinar, everyone will be receiving a copy of this deck, as well as the data that I'm using to create the deck. And also this webinar is being recorded, so you will have access to this webinar on our website for your viewing enjoyment in the future. Also, I'm going to be doing this training using the latest version of Mekko Graphics. So for those with an active subscription, this is a free download. To get the latest version of the software, you would simply go to our website here, mekkographics.com, and click the download button. And there are two options, one for Windows and one for Mac. Also, I'm going to be using Office 2013 for this webinar. And then just a quick side note on questions. If you have a question, please send them on the Q&A tab, and that way we'll keep moving along and have time to get through all of the prepared content. We do have someone monitoring those questions, and they will answer them as they come in. At the end of the webinar, if I have time, I will answer any questions that come in that might be more helpful to a wider audience. If we don't have time to get to all the questions, or if the question is more specific to your client situation, we will respond privately. Okay? All right, so let's get started. This is a Marimekko chart. It's also known as a market map. And a Marimekko can be described as a variable width 100% stacked bar chart. On this chart, we're showing package delivery market. So the focus of this chart, as indicated by the byline, is FedEx. How does FedEx compare across regions against other package delivery companies? So you can see here that FedEx is always on the bottom of this chart. We're going to show you how to create this chart. Okay. So creating a Mekko Graphics chart is always 3 steps. The first is, how do I get my data into the datasheet? I want to get my data somehow into Mekko Graphics. The second step is determine how do you want that data to appear in the chart. And then the third step is formatting the chart itself. So step 1, how do I get my data into Mekko Graphics? Okay, well, there's 3 primary ways. I could simply type it in, which would take a really long time in this webinar, and it would end up being a much longer webinar. But that is a possibility. The second way is to copy and paste from Excel. And the third way would be to create the chart directly from Excel data. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to copy the data right from Excel. So I'm going to jump over right now through my toolbar here at the bottom. I'm going to jump over to Excel, where I have data already prepared for this Marimekko chart. Now, in a data structure, in a Marimekko, the bars are always columns, and the series are always portrayed as rows. Not every cell needs to be populated. It is in this case, but if, for example, TNT didn't have a presence in Asia Pacific, that would be blank. So I'm just going to copy this range from Excel. I'm going to flip back over to PowerPoint. And as you can see here, in PowerPoint, I have a Mekko Graphics tab. And these first 8 or so icons allow me to insert my chart into into my PowerPoint. So these buttons are split buttons. If I click the down arrow of a button, I see all the different possible chart types that I can insert under that category. If I click the top half, I get the main chart type for that category. So in this case, a Marimekko is the main chart type. I could have done a bar Mekko, but I'm just going to click the top half of that button, and that will insert a Marimekko chart with sort of dummy data, just dummy data that I can then replace with my own data that's in my clipboard. And so I'm just going to right click and paste. Okay, and again, series are represented as rows, bars are represented as columns. And if I want to close my data editor, I can just click the close button here or the X. And if I want to see my data at any time, I can just go right back to chart data and click that button here. So now we have this edit chart toolbar, and this is our Mekko Graphics toolbar. You can see it's right in as an extra tab in PowerPoint. And the first thing I want to do was to get that data, get that data into PowerPoint, into Mekko Graphics, and it's now there. Now my edit chart menu allows me to do all sorts of different functions with Mekko Graphics. But I'm going to go to my second step. So my first step was get my data in, check, that's done. My second step is how do I want that data to appear in my chart? So I'm going to go to the bars and series task pane here. I'm going to click on this button. Okay. And the first thing I want to do is I want to sort my data. Okay. And then after I sort my data, I'm going to indicate exclusions to that sort. So the first thing I'm going to do, you can see that there's two tabs here, bars and series. I'm going to click on the bars button. And I'm going to go to the options sub-tab. And I'd like to sort my bars as widest on left. And then I'd also want to go to the series tab here and to options. And I want to, for my series, I want my biggest series to be on the bottom as my sort. So I'm going to click biggest on bottom. But then I also want to make sure that even if the biggest is on the bottom, that FedEx is always on the bottom. So I'm going to designate FedEx as an exclusion to my sort. So I'm going to do that by going to visibility. And for FedEx, going across this row, instead of being sorted, I'm going to pull it out and say, show FedEx always on the bottom. And my other series here, which is sort of a bunch of smaller, less relevant companies, let's put that always on the top. Okay. We'll go ahead and close this. And you can see that already dynamically our data is now sorted on the top. So we've done step 1 and we've done step 2. Step 3 is formatting the chart itself. So we're going to click on the chart button here in the edit chart toolbar. And I am recognizing that it is responding slowly. It will not respond this slowly for you. It does slow down a little bit when the webinar is, when it's connected to the webinar. So apologize for that little brief delay in how the windows are opening. So here in Format Chart, we sort of consider this the home base for all of your chart level formatting options. So there's a lot we can do here. The first thing I want to do is I don't need to see my bar totals in this case, so I'm going to hide them. So here in this first tab here, I'm just going to go ahead and uncheck my show for bar totals and hide those totals there. And I also want to see my values in my chart, not just the names of my series, but their values as well. So in labels include, I'm going to choose both the name and the value. And then I want to draw your attention to the next tab here, the values tab. And if I could have a favorite tab in Mekko Graphics, this would be my favorite tab, because you can do all of your number formatting, all of your values formatting in one place, and you can do that here through the values tab. So you can see how there's multiple rows here for the different kinds of labels that are in my chart, and I can set the formatting for all of those different kinds of labels. So in this case, I want to format my grand total here, which is the sum of my bar totals, and I want to show that in billions of, let's say, euros. So under a currency, I'll choose a euro, and billions here for units. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do with this chart is these labels here. They're a little hard to see. They're tiny little segments. They're hard to see. So I'm going to just pick them up, and using my mouse to hold down my mouse key and drag, I'm just going to move them out a little bit for visibility. And you can see that there's sort of an annotation line that tells me what the segment is that it's referring to. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just click off this chart, or I could click close chart editor, or just click anywhere else in my PowerPoint slide to go ahead and close that chart. And now it is here sitting as an object in PowerPoint. And if that was a lot, it's hard to gauge whether I'm going too slow or too fast. But if that was a lot, don't worry, because we're going to do a lot of repetition in this webinar so that you'll see things over and over, and it will become much more solidified for you. So let's go on to the next chart. This is a Marimekko chart. And my colleague Diane always likes to say, this is the chart type that you should be using, but maybe you're not. There are tons of use cases for a Marimekko chart. Now, a Marimekko chart is a variable width, variable height bar chart. So as you can see in this chart, the smaller competitors are shrinking. And the large competitors are growing. I'm just going to make this slightly bigger so that you can see it. There we go. Now, if I were to show you this chart as a standard bar chart that has fixed width for the bars, then the follow-on question would be, well, so what, right? Because you wouldn't get the information that you wouldn't be able to see how big, for example, Apple is above all others. So we would not know that all others is actually a really large percentage of the market. And therefore, it's very, very significant. But in this Marimekko, we see all others represents 41% of the market, and it's declining, which is hugely important information because it's a very significant percentage of the overall market. Standard bar chart wouldn't give you that information. This chart also shows a data row here at the bottom of the chart, which represents the width of the bar and is considered a best practice in a Marimekko chart. We actually have a great post on our website called it's called Why You Should Use a Marimekko. So if you're interested in this and want to use Marimekkos more, I encourage you to go ahead and check that out. All right, so let's create this Marimekko. What are our 3 steps? Step 1, how do I get my data in, right? Well, this time, instead of copying and pasting from Excel, we're going to create the chart directly from Excel. So I'm going to click over to Excel. Again, you're getting all this data, you're getting these completed slides, so so you'll have this. But so here's my data in Excel. Now, you'll notice that there is a handy-dandy Mekko Graphics tab here in Excel as well. Looks very similar to the one in PowerPoint, except these 2 buttons here on the left. One says Chart in Excel, and the other says Chart in PowerPoint. So it's asking, okay, you're going to create a chart. Do you want to drop it into Excel or do you want to drop it into PowerPoint? In this case, we want to drop it into PowerPoint. So we're going to click that icon. And then we're going to choose Marimekko from our highlighted range here. It will bounce me back over to PowerPoint. My mouse, my cursor, turns into a cute little Mekko Graphics icon, and wherever I left click my mouse is where this chart will insert. Okay, so there's my Marimekko. I've just completed step 1. If I wanted to see my data in Mekko, I can double click in the white space to open the data, or I could choose chart data here from the edit chart toolbar. If I just double click though, I will see my data is indeed here in the Mekko Graphics data editor. I'll go ahead and close that so you can see more. So step 2, how do I want my data to appear in the chart? Let's go again to this Bars and Series button. We're going to do a couple of things. The first thing we're going to do is in the Bars tab, we're going to go to the Options sub-tab. And we're going to indicate which one of these series is going to represent the width of the bar. So we're going to go down here and say market share. That's going to represent the width of my bar. Okay, and then I'm going to do my sort while I'm here. So I'm going to sort as my highest bar on the left by clicking that radio button. And then I'm going to go over to the series tab here. And I want my, I remember I wanted to pull out market share as a data row that goes underneath the chart. So market share is unchecked for showing on the chart because it is being used as the bar width. But I do want to have it show up as a data row underneath my chart. And so I'm going to check the data checkbox here to have it show up as a data row. And then I can actually format it right here and say, now I could have done it through my favorite tab in the chart task pane, right? But I can also do it here. And I want to format it as a percent. So I'll go ahead and format it as a percent. All right. And if I move this, you can see it's happening sort of on the fly. I don't even need to close the window to see that happening. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and close that. Okay, it's looking a little better, right? Now I'm going to go on to step 3, formatting my chart. I'm going to click on my chart button here. First thing I want to do is in the general tab here, what do I want to see in my chart? I don't really want to see my grand total in this chart. I'm going to uncheck that. That's not real relevant for this one. Now, in terms of my labels, there's only one series here, right? So I don't need to see it in every box here, do I? So I'm going to go ahead and hide those labels. I don't need to see them. And the next thing I want to do is, in terms of color, I have a bunch of different ways that I can color this chart. I can color it by, so I can color it by series based on my default color palette, and I can color it based on what I've defined before I sort the data or after I sort the data. I like to always have it after the sort because you don't want to have, work on your color palette and have it just right and then do a sort and it's all messed up, right? So I do recommend having come by series after sort, and we'll show you how you can set that for all of your charts a little later on in this webinar. The other two options here are by bars or by segments. And what if I colored here by bars? I would see instead each bar represented as a separate color in my palette. So I think we'll do that for this chart. Next, I'm going to hop on over to the next tab, which is my favorite tab, my values tab, because I want to format some of these values. And what I actually want to do is I want to format my axes labels and my bar totals as a percentage. So how do I do that? I'm going to click on the bar totals row and then using my control key to multi-select. I'm holding down my control key and I'm also clicking on y-axis, which will allow me to multi-select more than one row. And I want to format those as a percentage. Okay. And I also want to, do I want to add decimals? No, I don't need to add decimals in this case. So I'm going to format those as a percentage. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to tell users what is it that this y-axis represents? What do I need here? I need an axis title. So I'm going to go click on the axis button and you'll see that my window will change here on the right to format axis. And again, I apologize for that delay. It does not happen, except it's the webinar that's actually making that happen. Okay, so I'm going to add a y-axis title right here on the right, year-over-year growth. Okay. And if I wanted to do more formatting here, I can do it right here in the task pane, and we'll talk a little later about manual and computed axis scales. And a lot of this is pretty self-explanatory. Okay. All right, so this looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and click off this chart. You might have noticed that, let me just go back for one quick second. We're going to talk about this in length, but you might be wondering, because you were looking at it, that the chart that I was creating has a green border. The reason it has a green border is that it was created from Excel, and the green border is telling you that the data that is now in Mekko Graphics is the same as or synced to the range from which I created the chart in Excel. If I were to go ahead and open my data now and change the data in Mekko, the border would be red as an indicator to you that, okay, you're changing the data, it's not the same as it was in Excel. Okay, so we'll get much more into that a little bit later on, but I wanted to just point that out because it was probably something you were wondering. All right, the next chart here is a cascade. It's also called a waterfall chart or a change cascade because it's walking people through the individual components of change. So in this case, which chart had the biggest impact on revenue from quarter to quarter for these time periods? Well, clearly it's the iPhone, right? Because it's the biggest contributor to growth in the first time period that we have here and the biggest contributor to decline in the second quarter. So as we all know, nothing matters but the iPhone because it's the biggest contributor in both ways. Also, we have a segment comparison line here showing the overall percent change from Q3 2014 to Q3 2016. So we'll show you how to do that. And we also have an axis break here, and we'll go into that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this cascade chart. Again, we're going to create it from Excel. So here's my data in Excel, and in Excel, in the data structure of a cascade chart, a single series, I have here just a single series and multiple bars. If I wanted to do a stacked cascade, which is a more complex cascade chart, I could have multiple series and create a stacked cascade chart. But for the purposes of this webinar, we're just going to do a simple cascade. Again, from the Mekko Graphics tab here, we're going to choose Chart in PowerPoint, which is already selected, and choose Cascade. We have a bunch of different, well, we have two different options here. We can do a horizontal or a vertical. We're going to just do the default, which is a vertical. All right, and there's our Cascade chart with the green border. We've gotten our data in, that's step one, check. Second step is go to bars and series and make decisions about how we want this data to appear in the chart. Now, in a cascade chart, you generally want to set a total column or more than one total column, which is a bar that starts at the 0 on the y-axis. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say which bars are going to be our total bars. So for us, our total bars are going to be here, Q3, right? And this last one, Q3 2016. And we can make this our total bar. It's the starting bar, so it already is at 0, but can certainly make that the total bar as well. Those are our three totals. So let me just go ahead and move this and show you how the chart has already moved those bars down to the 0 axis. Go ahead and close this for now. And FYI, you can also right-click on any bar and designate it as a total. So if I were to just click on this bar, I would just choose show bar as total cascade. So I can do it also on the right click. Now the next thing I want to do, I really want my audience to focus on the changes here. But because my total bars are sort of dominating the chart, it's hard for me to see these individual components of change, and that's not what I want. I want my audience to focus on these individual components of change. So what I'm going to do is, one way to draw attention to the change is to insert an axis break. So I'm going to insert my axis break. When you insert one, where you click matters. So I'm going to put one maybe right about here. So I'm right-clicking and I'm inserting an axis break. Okay, and here it is. And if I click it, here's my axis break. You can see on the hover, my mouse over right now. I'm just putting my mouse over that break, and I can see the parameters of the break from 0 to 37. I can widen that break just by clicking and dragging my mouse, like so. And then I can also, we have two different styles. So if you like this style, the little squiggly line, or you can do the little slanty line for the axis break, you can do that as well. But now you can see these individual components of change, and this is what I want my audience to focus on. Okay. Now let's do a little more formatting. I'm going to go again to step 3 is how do I want my chart to look? I'm going to click on the chart icon here, and I'm going to, in my general tab, Because I have my bar totals here, I don't necessarily need to see my y-axis. So sometimes in a cascade, we don't want to show the y-axis because it's redundant, right? So I'm just going to not show it. So I'm going to hide my y-axis by just unchecking the checkbox in the General tab. Going to the Values tab. When you look at this chart, there's lots of digits of detail here in these totals, right? But I want to see this data in billions of dollars. But my data came in thousands. So actually in millions. So what I actually want to do is I want to set a different data scale, right? Because I could go into my data, right? I could look at my data and I could change my data format. And there's a lot of room for error in doing that, of mistyping. And this is the way my data was in Excel, and I don't really want to mess with it, right? So how do I handle that? Well, I can handle that by changing the data scale just in the chart, but not touching the data itself. So here in the data scale section of my values tab, I can choose, let's say 3, right, to convert to billions. And then I would format my bar totals, right, to be in billions of dollars. So it's a much quicker way. One of my colleagues, same colleague, calls this the biggest time saver no one's using. I want to make you aware of this. It is a really huge time saver. It's extremely efficient if you want to convert data from another source and but not have to touch the data itself. So now we've got our data shown in billions of dollars. Okay. Color, right? We want the iPhone to be the story here, right? So we want iPhone to reinforce our tagline message. So how do I do that? Well, one way to highlight anything in your chart is to use color. So what I'm going to do is for the iPhone, I'm going to click on this bar. I'm going to also click on this iPhone bar. And I'm going to, you'll notice that it intelligently gave me this window here on the right to format my segments here. So I'm going to color them orange. And now my message is a little bit more clear. One other thing I want to do, you can maybe think of this as step 4, which is sort of the bells and whistles or enhancements step of the chart. If I want to add bar comparison lines or growth lines or average lines, right, I can do that through this button here in my Edit Chart toolbar. And in this case, I want to add a bar comparison line. Okay, and it does default to the going from the first to the last bar. I can always pick up a bar and move it to any other valid bar, and it will automatically adjust. And it also brought up my format bar comparison line pane here on the right, and I can make changes to color and style and line width, and I can show my title. If I have a title, I could add one here. Right now it's showing the calculated percentage. Let's see, and I can, certainly color the line if I wanted to. to draw attention to it as well. And then the last thing I want to do in a cascade, it's sometimes you'll see linking the segments together. It's just a visual. But if I click that, you'll see that little connectors will appear that will link all of my bars together. And go ahead and click off this chart. And there it is. Now, we created this chart from Excel. What happens when the data changes in Excel? So let me introduce you to the Excel Link Manager. This is a window, an icon here in the Mekko Graphics tab, not in the Edit Chart toolbar, but in the Mekko Graphics toolbar here. If I click the Edit Chart, the Excel Link Manager, this is sort of the control panel for all of the charts that have links to Excel. And it gives me a lot of information. It says, okay, you have links to charts on slides 7 and 5. And for 7, this is what it's linked to. This is the name of the file, and this is its location, right? It'll show me its location. It will show me the name of the range and the parameters of that range, the last time it was modified, the status is currently synced, and then there's this column here called auto. By default, auto is off. It stands for automatic update. So if we want our chart in Mekko Graphics to update automatically when the data in Excel for that range changes, we would check this button. Now, we don't put it on by default because we don't want people to have their charts change without them absolutely wanting it to happen. So we don't want it to happen accidentally, so we make you check it. So we check, let's see what happens if we check this auto button, okay? And then what would happen if I were to go back to Excel and I were to change my, let's say my iPhone data to, I don't know, 21,000, right? Okay. Now all I did was change my data here, but if I go back over, this automatically updated. I don't even have to click on the chart. I don't have to do anything. It updates automatically. So you can see here that my data automatically updated. Okay, so that's automatic update to Excel. It is something that people tend to have a lot of questions on. I want to make note of the fact that we do have little training videos on our website that go over this in more detail. And definitely encourage you to look at those videos that we have on our website. We have lots of little training videos on our website on sort of specific things. So if you don't understand access breaks, go to our website. There's a little video, a 5-minute video on access breaks. If you don't understand data rows and data columns, go and there's one on data rows and data columns. If you don't understand link to Excel and automatically updating charts from Excel, there are videos on our website on that as well. Okay, so we're gonna move on, and we just went over sort of the 3 most popular chart types in Mekko Graphics: the Marimekko, the Marimekko, and the Cascade Chart. We're going to switch gears a little bit and just talk about another chart that's preferred by strategy professionals, the bubble chart. And this chart is showing 2 different variables that measure technology use. So you can see here it's comparing developed countries in Asia to emerging countries in Asia. And country size is represented by the size of the bubble. And it is in reference to this bubble right here, which is called the reference bubble, aptly named. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this chart. So we're going to hop over to Excel, and in this case, we're just gonna copy and paste, right? But I want to pause here a second and talk a little bit about the data structure because it's very different from a bar chart, right? In this case, we've got our series name, and then we have our Y and our X-axis coordinate. The relative bubble size is here, and then if you want to group your bubbles into categories, you can do that through the group button. And you can call that group anything, it doesn't really matter. You can use alphanumeric text, you can use alpha text, you can use numeric text, you can use whatever. The group is only being defined as, you know, contents that are the same. So the ones are the same and the twos are the same group. So we're going to go ahead and copy this range, hop over to Excel, hop over to PowerPoint, and in our quick launch here, we're going to go ahead and just insert a bubble. When you insert a new chart, it opens up automatically the data with pre-populated dummy data here. We're going to just replace it with our own. So I'm just right-clicking and pasting my data in. Can move this around, by the way, and you can actually dock it. So if we do have some questions around how do I see my data and my chart at the same time, you can do that because if you move it up, it will sort of automatically dock to the top of the screen, as you can see. For the purposes of this webinar, I'm not going to do that because I want you to see the chart mostly. So we're going to go ahead and close this data. And as you can see, the color is being defined by our groups. Okay, there's two groups, 1 and 2, which is developed countries and emerging countries. So I can use those groups for information to make a legend, or I can just use it to color by group. Okay. So really everything is where I want it. Normally I would go to my series task pane at this point to indicate how I want my data to appear. In this case, I'm doing a simple bubble chart. It looks pretty good. I'm going to skip over step 2 and go right to step 3, which is formatting the chart itself. So I'm going to click on the chart button. And I'm going to, first thing I want to do is I want to show quadrant lines to display my 4 quadrants in a bubble. So I can do that by adding vertical and horizontal quadrant lines. It's going to put it at the median right here. And I'm going to go to the Style tab, actually the Values tab first. And for the Values tab, I want to show them as percentages, not as decimals. So in my axis here, for my x-axis and my y-axis, first let's go to right-click here and show them both as percentages. Okay, so that's done. And I actually want to do a little more formatting on my axes. So I'm going to actually just go all the way to the axis button here and bring up my whole task pane where I can do kind of more things. So let's put a title on my y-axis. We'll call this smartphone penetration. And for my scale, I'm actually going to make a manual scale by just making the top go all the way up to 100. So I'm going to make this one 100 or 1. Oops. There we go. Great. So now that's going up to 100. And then for my x-axis, click here, we'll add a title, Internet. Penetration in the market. And the last thing I want to do is I want to call your attention that the reference bubble in a bubble chart is sort of considered like a third axis. So my reference bubble, I want to make sure that we know what we're talking about here. What does this 300 represent? It represents population. And I can also add millions for my unit. There we go. Okay, and that updates right here. Okay, so that is a simple bubble chart. Okay, we're going to take a little bit of a sideways turn for just a moment and talk about the preference manager. We've just gone over the 4 most popular chart types. And when we created those 4 charts, we were leveraging preference manager settings that were already selected, which are standard settings for all of your charts. So let's take a look at the preference manager and see where do we control all these options for the charts that we make. Now, the preference manager is a really excellent way to boost your productivity because you're setting defaults for all of your charts and will be a huge time saver rather than making changes chart by chart. Okay, so let's launch the preference manager. Where is it? It is in the Mekko Graphics tab here in PowerPoint. We'll just click that and it brings up our preference manager. There's a lot of options here. We're just going to go over a few. You'll see that there are 3 main tabs. The first tab is your themes or your color palettes tab, and this is where you are defining your palettes in your draw order and the colors for your Gantt charts. We'll go over Gantt later. So right now we are using a palette called Adjusted Modern. To set a default palette, you would just use the, click the button Set as Default, which will put a little bullet there by the default palette. The palettes that are standard, these are the ones underneath the word Standard Read Only. These are the ones that come automatically when you install our product, right? So these are all of the different palettes, and then you can create your own or import your own. They import as XML files. And you can create as many palettes as you want. So if you want certain palettes for using, corporate colors of your clients, you can create, a palette for Apple or a palette for Microsoft or whatever. And you can create as many palettes as you want. And then if you're creating decks for those clients, you would just switch to that palette. So let's look at the one I created, or actually let's see if we could create a new one. Let's click on New, and we get the Create a Palette editor here. It comes with our standard blacks and grays, which are used by the system, and then if I wanted to add colors, I could choose New and create specific RGB values here, or click on the color wheel, or if I wanted to take the colors from a PowerPoint theme, I could also do that, or a Mekko Graphics theme. So for example, we have several Mekko Graphics themes on our website, which you can download for free, and you can just go ahead and import those themes as well. So if I were to do that, here's one that I think is on our website. It's an XML. Just go ahead and choose that one, and it will come in with my palettes, and then I can move whatever colors I want to my draw order. So if I want to choose the whole thing, for example, which would be a large palette, I would just select those colors. And what I did was I just used Shift Select to do that, to select them all. And then click the the right arrow to create a draw order for these colors. And then I would want to create one for my lines as well. So I could do that. And it could be different or the same, or sometimes you want to have different colors. So I'm just removing some of them for our lines. And then for other sort of elements in the chart, you can make them whatever color you want. So if you're doing no shading color charts, which means that it's not using the multiple colors in the palette, you just want to use one color for all of your bars or series, you could set what that color would be. And same for lines. And for bubbles. And for your scatter charts. All right. And then for your Gantt charts, you can also set colors for all the different kinds of elements in a Gantt chart. And we'll name this whatever we want and save it. And then here it is. And if I wanted to make that available to be a chosen palette in Mekko Graphics, I would check the Show in UI, Show in User Interface button, and then I would see it in Mekko Graphics as well. And if I wanted to make it my default, I would set it as the default. Right now I'm going to keep this one as the default. Okay, so that's a little bit about color. The next tab is Settings. And there's a ton of options here. A lot of them are kind of self-explanatory, but we'll go over just a few. Coloring mode, remember we talked about coloring your series after your sort as opposed to before your sort. You can set that for all of your charts here in the coloring mode section. So I'm choosing here by series after sort. Other ones I just want to highlight that might not be as self-explanatory is place all labels and use blank series bar names. So defaults for your charts, if you want your series to show up even if they don't have a name in your data, if they're blank under the series name, but you still want them to show up, you would check that first box. And then if you want all of your labels to place in your chart, even if they don't fit with your font size that you've defined, then you would click Place All Labels. If you don't want them to fit and not appear on the chart, then you would have that unchecked. And that brings us to font size. So font size, you've got three options: your maximum size, your minimum size of labels on your chart, and the minimum smart place font size, which is what size, if it doesn't fit in the minimum and you want to place it anyway, what's the smallest size that you want it to appear. Okay. Now, if you're creating a lot of really dense charts, right, that are going to have lots and lots of labels, you might want to decrease your maximum. If you create charts with just, 4 or 5 series that are not really dense, you might want to increase your maximum and minimum. And if you want all of your labels to always appear exactly the same size, no matter what, make all of those numbers the same. Okay? All right, so I think that's it. The only other thing I want to show you is you can set line styles for all of the different kinds of lines in your chart. So solid or dashed, the width, and then the width of the line itself. So you can change those here. Okay, so that was a really brief overview of the Preference Manager. Again, there is a little tutorial on our website that goes into more detail of the Preference Manager. You're welcome to view that as your leisure. Now, the Preference Manager applies to all new charts that are created, right? But what if you have older charts that you've gotten, like say from a colleague, and you want those settings to update an existing chart to your current settings? Okay, so here's a tip. If you get a chart from a colleague, the fastest way to convert it to your chosen colors is to, I'm going to just open this up really fast just to show you, is to choose under the color drop down here, reset colors. And that will reset all of your colors to their default, and then apply PM settings. If you choose that afterwards, it will then update all of your charts to your current preference manager settings. So first reset colors, and then apply PM settings or apply preference manager settings. All right, so that is a little overview of the preference manager. Going back, let's go back to creating our charts. So this is a stacked bar chart, and this is showing the trend for Apple product sales, and it includes a Kiger column here on the right, compound annual growth rate, and a Kiger growth line. So in this case, I'm going to show you how to calculate your Kiger directly in the data sheet. Many people have told us that the Kiger formula in Excel is hard, it's complicated, so we want you to have it easy. So we've made a simple formula that you can use in the Mekko Graphics data sheet, and you can add that Kiger calculation directly into the data sheet, and I'll show you how to do that as well. All right. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go over to Excel again. Here's our data. We're going to drop this chart into PowerPoint. We're creating a stacked bar. So here we go. I click stacked bar, and there's a lot of different kinds here, 3 different, okay. And go click that. It drops us over into PowerPoint. I click my mouse to insert it here. And here's my chart. And let's open up the data. Click on chart data. Okay, so here's my data. And I want to add my Kiger column in Mekko Graphics using a Kiger formula and then propagate it down. So let's do that. So I want to add a column here. And we'll put it as a date range here, so 2011 to 2015, right? And then we're going to add our formula. Before I do that, you probably noticed that the chart became red bordered. Why? Because I'm changing my data in Mekko Graphics, and it all of a sudden detects that it is not the same as the data that from which I created the chart in Excel. That's okay, I'm just letting you know. So we're going to add our Kiger formula, and you just do Kiger, and then there's 3 parameters. The first parameter is your first value, followed by the last value, which is F2, right? Followed by the number of change years, which is, in this case, 4. Okay, that's it. Done. Boom. There's your Kiger. I'll just propagate that formula down. And there's my formula. And now the next thing I want to do is go ahead and tell Mekko Graphics that this column needs to be a Kiger. So we're going to go, so let me just close this up, and we'll go to bars and series. And go to bars, and for this column, we don't want it to appear on the chart, right? No, we want it to appear as a Kiger. Okay, so here we are, and it will automatically appear as a Kiger lined up to its corresponding series. And we'll go ahead and close this. Okay. And we'll go to step 3, which is formatting our chart itself. So we'll go to the chart icon. And let's do some formatting here. In this case, I don't need to show my label series names because we're going to have a legend, right? So let's go here to the General tab and let's show all, but we don't want to see the series name. So we'll turn that off. We want to see just the value here. So, and we want to show it as a %, which we'll do here. Actually, what we should do is show it as a calculated percentage. There we go. Better. Okay, so now we've got our data showing here as a percentage. Now we need to have a legend. So we're going to go ahead and add a legend. And then for our legend, here's our legend. We have a lot of options here for the legend. As soon as I click on it, it shows me my task pane here on the right where I have all sorts of different sorting options. I can pick up and move my legend anywhere I want, but there are several sort of default positions I could choose. Lower right, upper right, spread right, and ooh, what's this? Align to Kiger. So if I have a Kiger column and I have a legend, I can automatically align those labels to their corresponding value. So now you can see which series relates to which Kiger. Okay. I just need to add an axis title. You know, you do that through the axis task pane. I want to draw your attention to the fact that we do a lot on the right click as well. If I were to right click on my axis, I could just quickly do it right here, and that will show up automatically. So that's just a quicker way to do it if you want. And then the last thing I want to do is my sort of step 4, if you will, the enhancements. I want to add a Kiger growth line. So here I'm going to go ahead and add a growth line to this chart. And then I can have this calculation. Right now, this is just an absolute calculation of growth, but I can actually make the growth line a Kiger growth line. So I clicked here the radio button for Kiger in my format growth line, and now this growth line is actually calculated with the Kiger calculation for growth. Okay? And we'll go ahead and click off that chart. Okay, we are getting near the end. Thank you so much for sticking with me so far. We've got a few more things to go over. This is a stacked bar chart, Apple Financial Trends. It's one of the most popular charts to show a financial statement over time. It can also be used to compare multiple companies or business units. And it's comparing the financial performance by using sort of primary line items on like, say, an income statement. Okay. Now, this chart we are going to create in Excel, not in PowerPoint. So let's go over to Excel. And I have my data here for my chart. Now, if you were, why do I want to create a chart in Excel? Well, if you were using it as a dashboard, right? or financial reporting package, you might want to have everything in Excel itself, or if you wanted to use Excel as a scratch pad, a lot of our customers do that and then sort of play around with what the chart would look like before we actually create a presentation with that chart. So there's a lot of reasons that you might want to have your charts in Excel. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the range. This time we're going to choose chart in Excel, not chart in PowerPoint, and we're going to go ahead and create a stacked bar. There it is, and we'll just drag it up a little bit so you can see it next to the data. There we go. So here revenue is positive and all other costs are negative. And first thing we want to do is you'll notice that the same Mekko functions available in PowerPoint are here in Excel as well. Looks the same. We'll go to the bars and series to make some changes for how the data is going to be plotted on the chart. So this is new. What we're going to do here. This is not opened yet. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay, so you can make a series a line, a net line, or a data row. So in format series, we are going to show net income as a net line. Net line is particularly useful on a chart like this because it shows the difference between the positive and the negative values. Okay. And then both of these margin, gross margin and net margin, we're going to show those as data rows, but not on the chart. So we're going to uncheck show on chart and show them both underneath the chart as data rows. Okay. And then for the bars tab, we want this last bar to be our Kiger. So we'll show it as a Kiger, and it will uncheck it on the chart because it can't really be on the chart and be a Kiger. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we'll do that. So it's looking better, definitely. What else do I want to do? Well, my data rows are not formatted very well. That doesn't give me a lot of information, does it? So let's format our values. Let's go to the chart task pane, click on chart. First thing we want to do is, we don't need to see our series labels, so we're going to hide them. So we're going to say hide all for our labels. Okay. And then in the Values tab, the first thing we're going to do is let's set our data scale to 3 because we want to convert from millions to billions. We don't want to touch our data. There we go. And then we're going to scroll up here, select bar totals and axis. And net line, right? And we're going to format that as billions of, say, dollars. And then we want to go to our data rows, our 2 data rows here at the bottom. I'm clicking this last row, data rows and columns, and I want to show those as a percent. There we go. Okay, so that was a lot. The next thing I want to do is I actually want to show my line values. I didn't show them yet, did I? So I can just I can just actually right click directly on my netline and just say, please include the values. And I already formatted it, right? So it's already going to show formatted the way I asked. Couple other things. These are margins that you can see here. They're all movable, right? So you can adjust the relative position of the different areas of your chart. So if you want a little more real estate for your Kiger, you can do that. If I want to decrease this so that my date range shows up a little bit better, I can do that. If I want a little more room for my margin data rows, I can do that and sort of move that up. So you certainly have lots of options here for moving your margins. And if you don't want to see your margins, you would just uncheck the show margins toggle here at the top. And then let's have a legend. So here's my legend, and I'm going to align that guy to Kiger. So I'm just right-clicking in the legend area, or I could have done it through the legend task pane here, but I'm just right-clicking and I'm choosing Align to Kiger. Okay. So that was kind of a lot. There were a lot of little formatting tricks that we showed in that chart. All right, very quickly, we're going to jump back to PowerPoint and show you a scatter chart. This is a growth scatter chart type. It's comparing software categories. So it's very similar to a bubble in terms of its structure. So if I jump over to Excel and I create, I'll just copy this range to get my data in, go back to PowerPoint, and under the bubble, drop down the bottom half of the split button, I see the choice for scatter. All right, I'm just pasting my data in above, on top of the dummy data there. And again, just to show you the data structure, it's really very similar. We've got the series name, your X and your Y coordinates here, and then your group. So if you want to, in this case, I only have one group, but I could certainly have more than one group if I wanted to compare size of company or whatever. But right now I don't, and you have the ability to change the look of your markers, for example. If I want to have a bigger marker that stands out a little more, I can do that. I can change the color, things like that. I can also, obviously, I can move any label in any chart. Some exceptions in Gantt in terms of moving, but in any other chart, you can move any label in any chart to be anywhere you want. I can also edit a label's contents. So, for example, if I wanted to, I don't know, abbreviate conglomerates or something, I'm just double clicking the label, whatever. I don't think that's a real abbreviation, but I can do that, and then there's little red corners on it that's just indicating to you that that label has been edited, and obviously that doesn't show up in the finished product. So, so you can move any label, you can edit any label, you can resize any label. So if I wanted to click, if I right click on a label, I can do I can change the font typeface. I can do all sorts of different actions on labels. All right. And we have one more chart and we are done. The last chart we want to go over is the Gantt chart. So this Gantt chart is showing a timeline for how I created this webinar. And as we had talked about the steps of creating a bar chart or a bubble chart, the steps are a little bit different for a Gantt chart. So there's different steps. Step one is set your calendar, right? So define your date range. We're not going to create this one from scratch. I'm just gonna show you here this finished product. Whoops, sorry. There we go. So I'll double click this chart to open it. And the first thing we're going to do is set the calendar that's going to sort of define our header. So if I choose calendar here in our edit chart toolbar, it'll bring up a calendar. It looks the same as if you were like booking a trip to Cancun on Travelocity or Expedia or something, and you just set your data range by clicking and dragging and or typing in your start and your end date. And then you can decide sort of what appears in the header. So in my case, I've got months, weeks, and days appearing here, and I can change the format of what that date format would look like here. I have a few choices for each kind of date. I can, in this case, I'm showing the 3. I can show quarters or years as well, or any combination. And then step 2, once I've set my calendar, I can then insert my, my tasks. So here are my tasks, and as you can see, I've done my research, I've drafted a presentation, and then I've reviewed it with the QA team, and then conduct the webinar. And then I have subtasks under each. Now there's 3 different sort of task layouts that we support in the Gantt. This one is called boxes, where the subtasks appear as boxes, but if you don't like that, you can do it more as an outline. So how I did that is I clicked the list button here at the top, or I could do some combination of the 2, boxes and list, which looks a little like this. Okay, so those are my 3 sort of layout options for tasks. To enter a task, you can right-click and enter a task before or after your selected task, or add a subtask. And if you're adding a bunch of tasks, you can just hit the enter key and it will just insert another one. And then if you're done, you can hit escape. If you want to move tasks up and down, you can do that here, and there's shortcuts for those as well that you can see here. Or if you want to promote or demote a task. So if I wanted I don't know, task 2 to be a subtask under task 1, I could just click that task and I just actually hit the tab key, or I could move the task right here on the right click to demote, or go left to promote. Okay, and if you have a bunch of tasks, what we actually also support is if you have like Word or Notepad or Excel and you have a list of tasks, you can create that giant list of tasks and then copy it and then come here and paste it, and that would paste right in with your tasks. And it will paste at the level that you select. So if you select a subtask, they will insert all as subtasks. If you insert a subtask, it will insert as subtasks. There's 3 levels that you can choose for your Gantt. Okay, and then the next piece is step 3, which is your timeline elements. And what are your timeline elements? Well, there's processes. That's what this is. There's also, you can do bars, lines, or brackets, or milestones, which is this, basically something that has no the same start and end. It's just a one item as opposed to a timeline. So you can insert a process or a bar. Here's my process. I can move it anywhere I want. Just pick it up and move it. You can do that with any element here in your Gantt. If I want to, for example, insert a milestone, and then I want to move that milestone, I can do that, and it will automatically adjust to the date that I move it to. What else do I want to show you? There's so many things here. Can't show you everything. This is a really dense chart with a lot of options. If I want to right-click on a process, I can change the fill color. I can also show tips for the start or the end or both. I can also add borders to my timelines. Right now there's a 0.03 point border on my process. I can, here, clicking on this floater menu, I can have start and end dates or duration, or just start or just end. So that would look like that. I can also change the date for when this is, but it's probably easier to just click and drag. Or I can change the duration, but again, it's easier to click and drag. So if I wanted to shorten it, I would just go to the end until I get this little mouse over for shortening, and I can just click and drag and make it longer or shorter. So it's very much click and go for a Gantt chart. And if I want to do more formatting, I would click on this format button, which is kind of similar to like a chart task pane in bar charts, but it allows you to do more extensive formatting on your Gantt chart here. For example, if I wanted to add zebra shading to my, say, months, I could do that here. Now there's only 2 months, but let's see, it might be easier to do it with weeks, like so. So you can have, just for readability, you have lots of different options. I can also add up to 2 extra columns. So if I wanted to do that, if I want to add an extra column on the right, you can call this anything you want, but if you want 2 extra columns, a lot of people use it like who's responsible. So Betsy, whoops, I spelled my own name wrong. You can do that, or you can have another column as well, and you can have those columns on the left or on the right. Okay, so that's a little bit of an overview of Gantt. Again, there are training videos for Gantt if you want to do a deeper dive on our website. The last thing I want to quickly show you is that we do use PowerPoint native table functionality. This is a regular PowerPoint table that you would insert here through the PowerPoint menu for tables, but we add a couple of little bells and whistles so you can actually insert Harvey balls here. These are Mekko Graphics additions to this this toolbar. I can insert large, medium, small, or tiny Harvey balls, and then I can choose different color for the background of my cell that matches my Mekko colors. So this is my standard Mekko palette. So if I want my table's colors to match my chart colors, I could do that as well. And then these are the different types of Harvey balls that you can insert. Okay, that's just an addition that we use for Mekko tables. And that, we are done creating charts. I want to spend a little bit of time to just kind of tell you what resources we have available to you, because as subscription users, you have access and should take advantage of the free resources that we have available to you. So we have lots of videos, as I mentioned, and we also have a chart gallery, both in Excel and in PowerPoint, that you can use. So under the Mekko Graphics tab here, you can go under Help and look at this sample charts, and there's, I don't know, 25 or so sample charts that you can use. And you can even copy those charts into your own deck and change the data if it's faster. A lot of people tell us that they do that, so it's a little bit of a shortcut. We also have palettes available to you. So let me just go back to our website, and if you go to Resources and then go here to Palettes, we have these palettes are all available to you for free. You can download them and import them into your preference manager if you like our palettes. Okay. And regarding support, so two things. One, if you have a problem and you need to talk to our technical support people, we would recommend that you do that through this email support button in the Mekko Graphics tab. Why? Because the email support button will attach what's called a diagnostic file to your email, which just gives us a little bit of information that helps us help you faster. So we know what version you're using, we know what office you're using, we know, we have that information, and it just reduces the number of times we have to email you back and say, what version are you using, or whatever. That will generate an email that goes directly to our support team and attach the file. Also, if you are not having a specific problem with our software, but instead you're just not sure what to do, like you're not sure, you have an assignment to create a certain chart that does a certain thing, but you don't know which is the best chart, or you don't know what the best method would be, there is a Ask an Expert option here in the Help drop-down menu, and that will go to one of our charting experts. And as a subscriber, we are happy to help you get started or create a chart that has the message that you want to have. So feel free to utilize that and take advantage of the expertise that we have here at Mekko Graphics. All right, so we are coming right up on noon my time here. I have time for maybe one question. I know that we've